Nestled deep in the remote mountains, unreachable by modern roads, lies the enigmatic village of Gallows Reach. Isolated from the world, the village's existence is known only through hushed whispers and old faded maps. What makes Gallows Reach stand apart isn't just its seclusion, but the strange rule that governs it. No one speaks. It's not that the villagers have forgotten how. Rather, it's as if speaking is forbidden by some unspoken law, a boundary no one dares to cross. For generations, Gallows Reach has lived in absolute silence, its people communicating only through gestures, glances, and the occasional written note. Outsiders who stumble upon this strange village find themselves unnerved, drawn into its quiet spell, and those who have attempted to understand its secret often leave in a hurry, or don't leave at all. When a linguist named Dr. Avery, known for their fascination with forgotten languages and peculiar human behavior, hears of Gallows Reach, they are intrigued. Why would a whole village live in silence for generations? Determined to uncover the truth, the linguist embarks on a journey to Gallows Reach, unaware that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. The path to Gallows Reach was treacherous, winding through dense forests and up jagged mountain trails. The farther the linguist traveled, the less traveled the roads became, until they found themselves on foot, trudging through thick underbrush. The air grew colder the higher they climbed, and the oppressive quiet of the wilderness was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. When Dr. Avery finally reached Gallows Reach, they were struck by the village's eerie tranquility. The village was small, no more than a few dozen homes, built from dark wood and stone, standing like sentinels beneath the shadow of towering cliffs. Smoke rose lazily from chimneys, but there were no sounds of voices, no laughter, no cries of children at play. Even the birds seemed reluctant to sing here. The villagers moved about their daily routines in complete silence. They exchanged subtle nods and gestures, their faces calm, but their eyes seemed to speak volumes, an unsettling mix of quiet resignation and hidden fear. Dr. Avery approached a group of villagers near a well, smiling and offering a polite wave. The villagers regarded the linguist with curiosity, but said nothing. After a moment, one of the villagers, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, motioned for Dr. Avery to follow. She led the visitor to the village's inn, a modest, stone-walled building with a sign that bore no name. Inside, the innkeeper, an elderly man, handed Dr. Avery a small slip of paper. On it was written, "Welcome, rooms available, no talking." The linguist nodded, accepting the room key. As they settled in, a growing sense of unease gnawed at them. Why was no one speaking? What was this silence hiding? Over the next few days, Dr. Avery observed the villagers closely. They carried out their lives in a state of quiet efficiency, communicating entirely through body language and an intricate system of gestures. Some used small chalkboards to write short messages, while others simply nodded or pointed. Every interaction was wordless, yet nothing seemed to be lacking in their communication. They understood each other perfectly, as if words had long since become unnecessary. Yet there was something strange about their silence, something heavy, almost unnatural. It wasn't the kind of peaceful quiet one might expect in a remote village. It felt more like a silence imposed upon them, a silence born out of fear. Dr. Avery tried to engage a few villagers in conversation, but each time they would simply shake their heads and motion for silence. When the linguist attempted to speak to the village elder, a frail man with piercing blue eyes, he merely raised a trembling finger to his lips and tapped them, as if warning that speaking was dangerous. The most unsettling moment came one evening, when Dr. Avery ventured to the village square. A group of children was playing a silent game of tag. Their movements were lively, but their faces were tense. At one point, one child stumbled and let out a yelp of surprise, a sound that shattered the stillness. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Every villager within earshot froze. The children stopped playing, their eyes wide with fear. The elder, who had been sitting nearby, rushed to the child, grabbing them by the shoulders and pressing a hand firmly over their mouth. The look in his eyes was one of panic, not anger, as though the single sound had threatened to undo something fragile and dangerous. Dr. Avery watched from a distance, heart pounding. What had just happened? Why did a simple cry cause such alarm? Determined to understand the mystery of Gallows Reach, Dr. Avery began to dig deeper. Late at night, in the inn's dimly lit common room, they pored over old documents and letters they had brought along, fragments of history that mentioned Gallows Reach in passing. Most of the records were vague, but there were hints that the village had not always been silent. Centuries ago, Gallows Reach had been a thriving mountain community, filled with music, laughter, and vibrant conversation. The villagers were known for their elaborate festivals, where storytelling and song echoed through the valley. But something had changed. A tragedy, or perhaps an event so strange it had been scrubbed from history, had plunged plunged the village into silence. There were rumors of a curse, a punishment for something the villagers had done. Some said that long ago, the villagers had made a pact with a being that lived deep in the mountains, a spirit or force that demanded silence as a price. Others spoke of an ancient artifact hidden within the village, an object of immense power that could only be kept dormant as long as no one spoke of it. The more Dr. Avery uncovered, the clearer it became that Gallows Reach's silence wasn't just a tradition, it was a form of protection. But protection from what? The tension in Gallows Reach seemed to grow with each passing day. The villagers moved faster, their gestures sharper, their faces more drawn. Dr. Avery sensed that something was coming to a head, that the silence was fraying at the edges. But the linguist was no closer to understanding the true nature of the village's curse. One night, while wandering the outskirts of the village, Dr. Avery found an old chapel, half buried beneath overgrown vines. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols, markings that resembled an ancient script, though none the linguist had ever seen. At the center of the chapel stood a stone altar, upon which rested a small, ornate box. Driven by curiosity, Dr. Avery approached the box. There was something about it, something that whispered to be opened. With trembling hands, they lifted the lid. Inside was a worn piece of parchment, inscribed with a single word in a language they couldn't read. But as they spoke the word aloud, a deep, rumbling sound filled the air. The silence was broken. The instant Dr. Avery spoke, the world seemed to shift. The air grew heavy, and a chill swept through the chapel. Outside, the villagers stopped in their tracks, their faces contorting with fear and disbelief. The sound had been unleashed, and with it, something ancient and malevolent stirred. As Dr. Avery stumbled out of the chapel, they saw the villagers gathering in the square, their eyes filled with terror. The elder, his frail hands shaking, gestured frantically, but it was too late. The ground beneath the village began to tremble, and from the surrounding mountains, a low, ominous hum echoed through the valley. The villagers, still bound by their vow of silence, could do nothing but watch as the sky darkened and a force older than the village itself descended upon them. Dr. Avery, the outsider who had broken the ancient pact, stood frozen in the center of it all. The village was swallowed by darkness, and for what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but silence. True, unbroken silence. When the dawn finally came, Gallows Reach was gone, the village erased as if it had never existed. Dr. Avery awoke alone, lying on the mountainside, the village nothing more than a faint memory. The only sign that Gallows Reach had ever been real was the small, ornate box still clutched in their hands. The linguist would leave the mountains, but they would never speak of what happened there. Some mysteries, they had learned, are better left in silence, and in the wind, if one listened closely, the village's silent warning could still be heard.